The dust rose thick and hot on the horizon as the clattering wagon approached Westcliffe, Colorado, in the summer of 1878, carrying a cargo that made even the most hardened men turn away in shame. 4 young women, sisters by blood, chained together at their ankles and wrists like animals bound for slaughter. Wade Valentine stood at the edge of town, his weathered hat pulled low against the blazing afternoon sun, one hand resting on the worn grip of his Colt revolver. At 32, he had seen enough of life's cruelties to know that most weren't worth the effort of intervention. But something about the approaching wagon made his jaw tighten beneath his untrimmed beard. "Slave traders," muttered old Hank from the porch of the general store. "Disgraceful business." Wade's piercing blue eyes narrowed as the wagon drew closer. Slave trading had been outlawed for years, but here in the territories, far from the watchful eyes of federal marshals, darker trades still flourished. Human trafficking remained a shadowy business that preyed on the vulnerable, especially women. "Who's selling?" Wade asked, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable edge of a man who had killed before and would do so again if necessary. "Rumor says it's the Cartwright gang. Been running girls from Kansas through these parts. Heard they picked up these ones after killing their folks somewhere near Denver." Wade watched as the wagon rolled into the center of town. A crowd had already begun to gather, some drawn by morbid curiosity, others by darker intentions. The driver, a sallow-faced man with rotting teeth, stood up and began announcing his wares as if he were selling cattle. 4 healthy females. "Sisters guaranteed unspoiled, can be sold together or separate. Bidding starts at $50 each." Wade moved closer, the spurs on his boots jingling with each deliberate step. The 4 sisters huddled together on the wagon bed, their dresses torn and dirty, their eyes wide with terror. The oldest couldn't have been more than 22, the youngest perhaps 18. They were chained together by heavy iron shackles, the metal having rubbed their skin raw and bloody. Their faces bore the unmistakable resemblance of sisters, all with the same high cheekbones, though their hair ranged from honey blonde to dark chestnut. What struck Wade most, however, was not their beauty but the quiet dignity with which they held themselves, despite their circumstances. "Name your trade, Valentine," the driver called out, recognizing the tall cowboy. "These girls would make fine company for a lonely man." Wade said nothing as he approached the wagon, his gaze locked on the sisters. The oldest met his eyes, her chin lifted slightly in defiance despite her circumstances. In that moment, Wade recognized something in her that reminded him of himself, a refusal to be broken. "What's your name?" he asked her directly, ignoring the trader. "Victoria," she answered, her voice hoarse but steady. "Victoria Blackburn. These are my sisters Alina, Catherine, and Josephine." The slave trader spat on the ground. "Names don't matter none, they answer to whatever you want to call them." Wade turned to face the man, his expression unchanged but his eyes carrying a coldness that made the trader take an involuntary step back. "I'll take them," Wade said quietly. The trader's face broke into a yellow-toothed grin. "All 4, that'll be $200 then." "Though I might give you a discount if you misunderstand me," Wade interrupted. "I'm not buying them, I'm taking them." A hush fell over the gathered crowd. The trader's hand moved toward the shotgun propped against his seat. "Now listen here." Valentine Wade's gun was in his hand before the trader could blink, the barrel pointed steadily at the man's chest. "No, you listen. Slavery's been illegal for 13 years. What you're doing here isn't just wrong, it's against the law." "Law?" The trader laughed nervously. "What law? I don't see no marshal here." "Then I guess today I'm the law." Wade's voice was calm, but his intention was clear. "Now, you have 2 choices. You can hand over the keys to those chains and ride out of town alive, or you can try to stop me." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the trader reached into his pocket and pulled out a small iron key. He tossed it at Wade's feet. "You're making a mistake, Valentine. Cartwright won't forget this." Wade picked up the key without taking his eyes or his gun off the trader. "Tell Cartwright if he has a problem, he can come find me himself." The trader glared at Wade, then at the sisters before climbing back onto his wagon. With a crack of his whip, he turned his horses and headed out of town, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Only when the traitor was well out of sight did Wade holster his weapon. He turned to the sisters, who were watching him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Let me get those chains off you," he said, approaching them carefully. "You're free now." Victoria, the oldest, watched him warily. "Free to do what? We have no home, no money, no family but each other." Wade unlocked her chains first, then moved to her sisters. "You have a place to stay until you figure things out. My ranch is just outside of town. It's not much, but it's safe." Eleanor, the second oldest with hair the color of wheat, rubbed her raw wrists. "Why would you help us? What do you want in return?" Wade met her gaze directly. "Nothing. Some debts can't be repaid, and some things are just the right thing to do." Catherine, her auburn hair falling in tangled waves around her face, looked at him skeptically. "No one does something for nothing out here." "I do," Wade said simply, helping Josephine, the youngest, to her feet. Her ankle was swollen where the chain had cut into it. "Can you walk?" Josephine nodded, though her face paled with pain. "I'll manage." Wade looked at the four sisters standing before him, battered but unbroken. "My wagon's tied up at the livery. Wait here, I'll be back in a few minutes." As he walked away, he heard Victoria ask in a low voice, "Can we trust him?" He didn't hear the response, but he understood their caution. Trust was a luxury few could afford in the West, especially women who had already suffered at the hands of men. When Wade returned with his wagon, he found the sisters huddled together on a bench outside the general store. Several townspeople had gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. Some looked sympathetic, others disapproving. "Ladies," Wade said, helping them into the wagon one by one. "We'll stop at the general store for supplies, then head to my place. It's about an hour's ride." Victoria sat beside him on the driver's bench, her sisters in the back. "Mr. Valentine, just Wade." "Wade, we have nothing to offer you, no way to pay you back." Wade clicked his tongue at the horses, setting them in motion. "I'm not looking to be paid back, Miss Blackburn." "Victoria," she corrected softly. Wade nodded. "Victoria." He glanced at her, noting the determined set of her jaw despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "Sometimes family is what you make it, not what you're born into. For now, consider yourselves part of mine." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, then turned to watch the town recede behind them. "Family," she whispered, as if testing the word to see if it still held meaning. Wade didn't respond. He knew words meant little compared to actions. Instead, he focused on the road ahead, knowing that he had just made 4 deadly enemies in the Cartwright gang, but gained 4 people who might, with time, come to trust him. The Valentine ranch sat nestled in a valley between 2 gentle slopes. The main house, a sturdy 2-story structure of timber and stone that Wade had built with his own hands after returning from the war. A corral held several horses, and a small barn housed his cattle during the harsh Colorado winters. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and well-maintained. As they approached, Victoria sat up straighter, taking in the sight. "You live here alone," Wade nodded. "Since my father passed 3 years back. There's a hand who helps with the cattle, Miguel, but he has his own cabin near the south pasture." Eleanor leaned forward from the back of the wagon. "It's lovely." Wade offered a rare smile. "It's home." He helped them down from the wagon, carrying Josephine when it became clear her ankle wouldn't support her weight. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable, with a large kitchen, a sitting room with a stone fireplace, and 4 bedrooms upstairs. "You'll each have your own room," Wade explained, setting Josephine down gently on a chair. "There's a washroom off the kitchen. I'll heat water for baths." Catherine looked around, her expression guarded. "Where will you sleep?" "There's a small room off the kitchen that used to be my father's study. I've been using it since he passed." Victoria began to protest. "We can't take your bedrooms." Wade held up a hand. "You're not taking anything, I'm offering it." He looked at each of them in turn. "You're safe here. No one will harm you while you're under my roof." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Thank you," Victoria finally said, her voice thick with emotion she clearly struggled to contain. "For everything." Wade nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. "I'll show you to your rooms, then I'll bring up water for washing." There are some of my mother's old clothes in the trunks upstairs. They might not fit perfectly, but they'll be clean. As he helped them settle in, Wade was struck by the quiet strength of these women. Despite everything they had endured, they moved with purpose, each taking care of the others in their own way. Victoria, clearly the leader, organized their few possessions. Alina immediately began examining Josephine's injured ankle with gentle, knowing hands. Catherine set about exploring the house, mentally cataloging everything, her sharp eyes missing nothing. That night, after baths and a simple meal that Wade prepared, they gathered in the kitchen. The sisters, now dressed in clean, if slightly ill-fitting clothes, looked transformed. With the dirt and fear washed away, their natural beauty shone through, but Wade noticed more than that. He saw the intelligence in their eyes, the careful way they watched him, the protective stance they took around each other. "Tomorrow we can go into town for proper supplies," Wade said as he poured coffee. "Clothes that fit, personal items you might need." Victoria shook her head. "We have no money." "I do," Wade replied simply. "We won't be your charity case," Alina said firmly. Wade considered this. "Then we'll work out an arrangement. You help with the ranch, I provide room and board. Is that agreeable?" The sisters looked at each other, then Victoria nodded. "Yes, that would be acceptable. What kind of work do you need done?" "This place could use a woman's touch," Wade admitted. "And there's always work on a ranch, cooking, cleaning, mending. I don't expect you to be farmhands, but any help would be appreciated." Catherine leaned forward. "Do you have a garden?" Wade shook his head. "Never had time to plant one." A small smile crossed Catherine's face. "We could start one. Our mother taught us about growing things." "I'd like that," Wade said. Josephine, who had been quiet until now, looked up from her cup. "Can you teach us to shoot? A gun, I mean." Wade raised an eyebrow. "You want to learn to shoot?" Josephine met his gaze steadily. "I never want to be helpless again." Wade nodded slowly. "I can teach you all if you'd like." "Yes," Victoria said firmly, "we would." That night, as Wade made up his bed in the small study downstairs, he pondered the strange turn his life had taken. He had lived alone since his father's death, keeping mostly to himself, speaking only when necessary. Now his quiet home was filled with the presence of 4 women who had brought with them a complexity of emotions and needs he hadn't anticipated. He knew the Cartwrights would come looking eventually. They weren't the type to let go of what they considered their property, especially not after being publicly humiliated. Wade would need to be prepared. More importantly, he would need to prepare the Blackburn sisters for what might come. As he drifted toward sleep, Wade realized that for the first time in years, his house felt like a home again, filled with the soft sounds of other people. The gentle creaking of floorboards as someone moved upstairs, the murmured conversations between sisters reuniting after a nightmare. Family, he had told Victoria. The word had slipped out without thought, but as sleep claimed him, Wade knew it had been the truth. Somehow, in the span of a single day, these 4 women had already begun to fill the empty spaces in his home and his heart that he had long since stopped noticing. The morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows of the Valentine ranch. Wade had been up since before dawn, tending to the livestock and preparing a hearty breakfast of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. The smell of coffee permeated the house, drawing the sisters one by one to the kitchen. Victoria was the first to appear, her dark hair neatly braided, wearing one of Wade's mother's old dresses that had been hastily adjusted to fit her smaller frame. "Good morning," she said, her voice still carrying a hint of caution. Wade nodded, sliding a plate toward her. "Eat while it's hot." Alina joined them next, followed by Catherine. Josephine limped in last, her ankle still swollen but looking better than the previous day. "I'll make a poultice for that after breakfast," Alina said to her youngest sister. "The herbs I saw growing near the creek should help with the swelling." Wade looked at her with interest. "You know medicine?" Alina nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Our mother was a healer. She taught me everything she knew." A shadow crossed her face. It wasn't enough to save her in the end. A heavy silence fell over the table. Wade didn't press for details about their parents' deaths. Those stories would come in time if they chose to share them. I thought we might go into town today, Wade said instead, changing the subject. Get you all properly outfitted, Victoria tensed. Is that wise? The man who had us, he might have friends there. Wade met her gaze steadily. Better to face them head on than hide. Besides, the town should know you're under my protection now. It'll make things easier going forward. Protection, Catherine repeated, her tone making the words sound like a prison. Wade set down his coffee cup. Not the way you're thinking. You're free to leave whenever you choose. But while you're here, anyone who means you harm will have to go through me first. Josephine looked up from her plate. Have you killed men before, Mr. Valentine? The directness of the question didn't faze Wade. Yes, in the war and after, never without cause. What was your cause yesterday? Victoria asked quietly. Wade considered his answer carefully. Justice, maybe, or perhaps just the memory of my own sister who died during the war while I was away fighting. She was alone, unprotected. He met Victoria's eyes. No one should have to face such things alone. The confession hung in the air, more revealing than Wade had intended. Victoria's expression softened slightly, a silent acknowledgement of his loss. We'll go to town, she decided, speaking for all of them as seemed to be their custom. But we stay together, Wade nodded, always. The ride into Westcliffe was tense. The sisters huddled close together in the wagon, Wade vigilant as they approached the main street. Townsfolk stopped to stare, some with open curiosity, others with barely concealed disapproval. Wade helped the women down from the wagon in front of Mercer's dry goods, conscious of the eyes watching their every move. He led them inside, where Mrs. Mercer, a plump, kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted them with barely concealed surprise. Mr. Valentine, she said, her eyes darting between Wade and the four sisters. How unexpected to see you with company, Mrs. Mercer, Wade nodded. These ladies need complete wardrobes, everything from undergarments to boots. Can you assist them, Mrs.? Mercer's professional demeanor quickly overcame her curiosity. Of course, ladies, if you'll come this way. As the sisters followed Mrs. Mercer toward the back of the store, Victoria lingered. We won't take advantage of your generosity, she said quietly to Wade. Wade shook his head. Get what you need, not just what will suffice. I'll be at the hardware store across the street. Take your time. Victoria watched him for a moment longer, then nodded and joined her sisters. Wade exited the store, crossing to the hardware shop where he needed to purchase nails and tools for repairs around the ranch. He was examining a new plow blade when a voice spoke behind him. Bold move yesterday, Valentine. Wade turned slowly to find Sheriff Tom Dawson leaning against a display of shovels. The sheriff was a reasonable man, but not one to ignore potential trouble in his town. Was the right thing to do, Wade replied simply. Maybe so, but the right thing has a way of stirring up the wrong people. Dawson stepped closer, lowering his voice. Word is the Cartwrights are on their way, 4 brothers, all mean as rattlers and twice as quick to strike. Wade continued examining the plow blade. Let them come. Damn it, Wade, Dawson muttered. This isn't just about you anymore. You've got those women to think about now. Wade finally met the sheriff's gaze. I am thinking about them. They're not merchandise to be bartered or traded. They're people. Dawson sighed. I know that, but the Cartwrights don't see it that way. They invested money in those girls and they won't just walk away. Then they'll have to deal with me. Dawson studied Wade's face, then nodded slowly. I'll back your play if it comes to trouble in town, but out at your ranch, you're on your own. Always have been, Wade replied. Dawson glanced out the window toward the dry goods store. What do you plan to do with them anyway? Give them a chance to decide their own futures. A hint of a smile touched the sheriff's weathered face. Turning into a regular knight in dusty armor, aren't you? Wade didn't respond, but Dawson hadn't expected him to. The sheriff pushed off from the display and headed toward the door. Just watch your back, Valentine, and theirs. When Wade returned to Mercer's an hour later, he found the sisters surrounded by packages and boxes, looking both pleased and uncomfortable with their purchases. I hope this isn't too much, Alina said, gesturing to the pile. Wade shook his head. It's necessary. As they loaded the wagon, Wade became aware of whispers and stares from passers-by. The sisters noticed too, their postures stiffening under the scrutiny. "Ignore them," Wade advised quietly. "People always talk, it doesn't matter." Victoria's chin lifted slightly. "It matters when their talk affects how we're treated." Wade helped Josephine onto the wagon, her new boots complementing a simple but well-made dress of pale blue. "Then give them something worthwhile to talk about," he suggested. "People will always judge." "The trick is making sure they judge you on your terms, not theirs." Catherine laughed, a surprisingly melodic sound. "Is that your philosophy, Mr. Valentine?" Wade allowed himself a small smile. "Something like that." As they prepared to depart, a woman approached the wagon. Mrs. Davidson, the preacher's wife, stood with her hands clasped before her, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Mr. Valentine," she began, her voice pitched to carry to nearby listeners, "I wanted to extend an invitation to you and your guests to attend services this Sunday." Wade recognized the invitation for what it was: part genuine Christian charity, part opportunity to inspect the new additions to the community. "Thank you, Mrs. Davidson," Victoria answered before Wade could respond. "We would be delighted to attend. It's been some time since we've had the comfort of community worship." Mrs. Davidson looked momentarily surprised, then pleased. "Wonderful. Sunday at 10 o'clock. Everyone will be so glad to meet you properly." As they drove away from town, Wade glanced at Victoria. That was well handled. She met his gaze evenly. "My father was a minister before he became a farmer. I know how church communities work. Better to join them than be the subject of their speculation from afar." Wade's estimation of Victoria rose further. She understood strategy, the delicate negotiations of social acceptance that had never interested him but would be crucial for the sisters if they were to establish themselves in Westcliffe. "Your father was a minister?" Wade asked, curious about the glimpse into their past. Victoria nodded. "In Kansas originally. He moved us west after our mother died, looking for a fresh start." Her voice grew distant. "He found an end instead." Wade didn't press for more. Instead, he focused on the road ahead, allowing Victoria the privacy of her grief. Beside him, she sat straight-backed and dignified, her profile sharp against the backdrop of the mountains. Back at the ranch, the sisters quickly set about organizing their new possessions, transforming the previously Spartan bedrooms with small touches that made them their own. Wade watched with quiet amazement as his house changed around him. Curtains appeared in windows that had been bare for years. The dining table, long used only as a place to eat hurried, solitary meals, now bore a simple vase of wildflowers that Catherine had gathered. That evening, as Wade returned from checking on the livestock, he paused in the doorway of his home. The smell of cooking filled the air, not his usual basic fare, but something rich and fragrant. Voices drifted from the kitchen, the sisters talking among themselves as they prepared dinner. For a moment, Wade felt like an intruder in his own home. Then Victoria appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on an apron. "We hope you don't mind," she said, noticing his hesitation. "Eleanor insisted on cooking tonight as a small thank you." Wade stepped inside, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. "I don't mind." Victoria studied him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "This is strange for you, isn't it, having people in your space?" Wade considered denying it, then decided on honesty. "Yes, but not unwelcome." A smile touched the corner of Victoria's mouth, transforming her serious face. "Good, because Josephine has already named the cat that's been lurking around your barn, and Catherine is planning where to plant herbs in the morning." Wade felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. "What did Josephine name the cat, Sergeant? She says he looks very official." A chuckle escaped Wade before he could stop it. Victoria's smile widened in response, and for a moment they shared something simple and genuine: amusement over a named barn cat, the beginning of ease between two people who had been strangers just a day before. The moment was broken by Eleanor calling from the kitchen. "Victoria." "Can you help with the bread?" Victoria turned away. "Coming." She glanced back at Wade. "Dinner will be ready soon." As she disappeared into the kitchen, Wade remained in the hallway, absorbing the changes in his home. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten the comfort of voices, the sense of purpose that came from providing for others. It was disorienting but not unpleasant. Dinner that night was unlike any meal Wade had eaten in years. Eleanor had prepared a savory stew with the limited supplies available, somehow transforming basic ingredients into something that reminded Wade of his mother's cooking. The table was properly set, the conversation flowing between the sisters naturally, occasionally including Wade with a question or observation. Wade observed them as they ate, noting the dynamics between them. Victoria, the protector and leader, Eleanor, the healer with gentle hands but firm opinions, Catherine, observant and practical, and Josephine, the youngest but with a spark of defiance that suggested she might be the bravest of them all. "Mr. Valentine," Josephine said suddenly, interrupting his thoughts, "you promised to teach us to shoot." Wade set down his fork. "I did. We'll start tomorrow if that suits everyone." Victoria looked concerned. "Is it necessary so soon?" Wade met her gaze directly. "The sheriff says the Cartwrights are coming. Could be days, could be weeks, but they'll come. Better you all know how to defend yourselves before then." A silence fell over the table, the reality of their situation momentarily overshadowing the domestic peace they had created. "Will they really come after us?" Catherine asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Wade nodded. "Men like that don't let go easily. They see you as property that was stolen from them." "We're not property," Eleanor said fiercely. "I know that," Wade assured her. "But understanding how your enemy thinks is the first step to defeating them." Victoria straightened in her chair. "Then we'll learn to shoot, and anything else you think might help us defend ourselves." Wade looked at each of them in turn. "It won't come to that if I can help it. But being prepared is never a mistake." After dinner, as the sisters cleared the table, Wade stepped outside onto the porch. The evening air was cool against his skin, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. He rolled a cigarette, lighting it and taking a deep draw as he considered the situation. 4 women, recently traumatized, now under his protection. The Cartwright gang, notorious for their cruelty, potentially on their way to his doorstep. A town watching with curious eyes, ready to judge both him and the sisters for any misstep. The door opened behind him and Victoria stepped out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. "May I join you?" she asked. Wade nodded, moving to make space for her on the porch bench. Victoria sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "You've done more for us than anyone has in a long time," she said after a moment of silence. "I want you to know that we recognize that and we're grateful." Wade exhaled a stream of smoke. "No need for gratitude." Victoria turned to look at him. "There is. What you did, what you're doing, it's not common. Most men would have looked the other way." "I'm not most men." "No," Victoria agreed softly. "You're not." She hesitated, then continued. "I need to know something, and I need you to be honest with me." Wade waited, sensing the importance of what was to come. "Are we truly free here?" Victoria asked. "Or have we simply traded one form of captivity for another, kinder one?" The question struck at the heart of what Wade had been pondering himself. He took his time answering, wanting to give her the truth she deserved. "You're free," he said finally. "This place, these walls, their shelter, not a prison. If you choose to leave tomorrow, I won't stop you. But while you're here, you're family, and family protects its own." Victoria absorbed his words, her expression thoughtful. "Family," she repeated the same way she had the day before, testing the word. "Our parents are dead, our home is gone, all we have is each other." "Sometimes that's enough," Wade said. "Sometimes it has to be." Victoria was silent for a long moment. "They killed our father in front of us," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Made us watch. Our mother had died the winter before. Father was trying to take us to California to her sister's family. We never made it past Denver." Wade felt a surge of anger but kept his expression neutral. "I'm sorry." Victoria's hands tightened in her lap. "The Cartwrights found us on the road, 4 men against 1. They shot him when he tried to fight back." Her voice remained steady, but Wade could see the cost of her control in the whiteness of her knuckles. "They said we'd fetch a good price. Young, educated women are rare out here." Wade extinguished his cigarette, focusing entirely on Victoria. "You don't have to tell me this." "I do," she insisted. "You need to understand what kind of men they are, what they're capable of." "I understand men like that better than you might think," Wade said quietly. Victoria studied his face. "You were in the war, Union cavalry. Saw things I hope you never will." "And after," Victoria pressed gently. Wade's jaw tightened. "After I hunted the men who killed my sister, 3 of them, found them in Texas." "Did you kill them?" "Yes." Victoria nodded slowly. "Good." The single word, spoken with such conviction from a minister's daughter, surprised Wade. He looked at Victoria with new understanding. Beneath her composed exterior was a woman of deep feeling and firm moral conviction. "The Cartwrights will come," Victoria said. "And when they do, they'll expect to find frightened girls. Instead, they'll find us waiting for them." Wade saw the determination in her eyes, the steel beneath the softness. "Yes," he agreed, "they will." They sat together in companionable silence until the night grew colder and the stars fully emerged in the vast Colorado sky. When Victoria finally rose to go inside, she paused, her hand resting lightly on Wade's shoulder for just a moment. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "And for everything else." As Wade watched her disappear into the house, he realized that the Blackburn sisters were changing him as much as he was changing their circumstances. Victoria, in particular, had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival, a connection to another human being that ran deeper than casual acquaintance. It was too soon to name what he felt, but Wade recognized its potential. And for the first time in a long while, he found himself looking toward the future with something other than grim determination, something that, if he allowed it, might grow into hope. The next morning dawned with a sense of purpose. After breakfast, Wade led the sisters to a clearing behind the barn, carrying a wooden crate filled with tin cans and bottles. He set them up on a fallen log about 30 paces away, then returned to where the women waited. "First rule of handling a firearm," Wade said, removing his Colt from its holster, "is that you never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. Second rule is to always check if it's loaded before handling it." He demonstrated, opening the cylinder and showing them the bullets inside before closing it again. "We'll start with this revolver. It's smaller than a rifle, easier to handle for beginners." For the next hour, Wade patiently instructed each sister in the proper way to hold, aim, and fire the weapon. Victoria took to it naturally, her aim steady and her concentration unwavering. Eleanor was more hesitant, clearly uncomfortable with the weapon but determined to master it. Catherine approached the task methodically, analyzing each aspect before attempting it. Josephine's enthusiasm outpaced her skill, but her determination was fierce. By mid-morning, all 4 sisters had successfully hit targets, though with varying degrees of accuracy. Wade watched them with growing respect. Despite their genteel upbringing, they approached this new challenge with the same quiet strength they had shown in everything else. "You're all doing well," he said as they took a break. "Tomorrow we'll try the rifle. It's better for distance, which might be important if trouble comes to the ranch." Victoria wiped a smudge of gunpowder from her hand. "Do you really think they'll come here, the Cartwrights?" Wade nodded. "Men like that don't forget, and they don't forgive." "How many are there?" Catherine asked. 4 brothers, according to the sheriff, plus whatever hired guns they might bring along." Eleanor's face paled. "Against the 2 of us." 5, Josephine corrected firmly. "We count 2. Wade looked at the youngest Blackburn sister with approval. "She's right, in a fight numbers matter. But so does home ground advantage. We know this land, they don't." Victoria studied the terrain around them. "We should prepare, set up defenses, make plans for if they come." Wade was impressed by her strategic thinking. "We will, but first, let's continue with your shooting lessons. The best defense is being able to protect yourself." As they resumed practice, Wade found himself watching Victoria more often than the others. There was something compelling about her quiet confidence, the grace with which she handled herself even in this unfamiliar task. When she successfully hit 3 targets in a row, The smile that briefly illuminated her face sent an unexpected warmth through him. Later that afternoon, as the sisters went about their chosen tasks around the ranch, Wade rode the perimeter of his property, checking fences and considering defensive positions. His mind kept returning to Victoria, her strength, her intelligence, the way she cared for her sisters. It had been a long time since a woman had captured his attention so completely. When he returned to the house, he found Catherine on her knees in a patch of earth near the kitchen door, carefully turning the soil. "Starting your garden?" he asked, dismounting. Catherine nodded, brushing dirt from her hands. "The soil is good here. I think we could grow quite a bit, given time." The phrase "given time" hung between them, a reminder of the uncertainty of their situation. Wade led his horse toward the barn. "Plant what you like," he said over his shoulder. "This land could use some tending." Inside the barn, Wade was surprised to find Victoria brushing down one of his horses, her movements confident and practiced. "You know horses," he observed. Victoria nodded without pausing in her work. "Our father kept a few. I used to help him with them." Wade leaned against the stall door, watching her. "You're full of surprises, Miss Blackburn." Victoria glanced up at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "As are you, Mr. Valentine." Their gazes held for a moment longer than necessary before Wade cleared his throat and turned to tend to his own horse. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the rhythmic brushing and the occasional soft nickering of the horses. "Why did you really help us?" Victoria asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "The truth, please." Wade continued brushing his horse, considering his answer. "When I saw you in that wagon," he said finally, "I saw something I recognized, a refusal to be broken. It reminded me of myself after the war." Victoria stopped brushing, turning to face him fully. "What happened to you in the war?" Wade's hand stilled on his horse's flank. "I fought, I killed, I watched friends die, the usual story. And your sister, you mentioned she died while you were away." A familiar pain tightened Wade's chest. "She was attacked by deserters passing through our town. She fought back. They killed her for it." Victoria's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry," Wade nodded, acknowledging her words. "When I came home and learned what happened, something in me changed. I tracked those men for months. When I finally found them." He trailed off, unwilling to describe the violence of that confrontation. "You got justice for her," Victoria finished simply. "I got revenge," Wade corrected. "There's a difference." Victoria stepped closer, her dark eyes searching his face. "And is that what this is about? Revenge against men like those who hurt your sister?" Wade met her gaze steadily. "Maybe at first, but now," he hesitated, unused to articulating his feelings. "Now I think it's about making sure what happened to her doesn't happen to anyone else I care about." The implication of his words that he cared about Victoria and her sisters hung in the air between them. Victoria's expression changed subtly, a flash of vulnerability crossing her features before she composed herself again. "Thank you for your honesty," she said quietly. She returned to brushing the horse, but Wade could sense a shift in her demeanor, a softening toward him that hadn't been there before. As the days passed, a routine established itself at the Valentine ranch. The mornings were dedicated to shooting practice and defense preparations. Afternoons found the sisters engaged in various tasks around the property, Catherine in her growing garden, Alina organizing a small area for her medicinal herbs, Josephine helping Miguel with the livestock, her injured ankle now almost healed. Victoria split her time between all these activities, overseeing her sisters while also spending increasingly more time with Wade. Their conversations, initially cautious and practical, gradually deepened into something more personal. Wade found himself sharing stories from his past that he had never told anyone, memories of his childhood, his time in the war, the years of solitude that followed. Victoria, in turn, told him about growing up as a minister's daughter, the loss of their mother to consumption, the dreams she had harbored for herself and her sisters before tragedy struck. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the sisters had arrived, Wade found Victoria sitting alone on the porch. a book open in her lap but her gaze fixed on the sunset painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "May I join you?" he asked, echoing her words from nights before. Victoria smiled, gesturing to the space beside her. "Of course," Wade sat, noting the title of her book. "Shakespeare, Sonnets," Victoria confirmed. "I found it on your bookshelf. I hope you don't mind." "It was my mother's," Wade said. "I kept her books, though I don't read them much." Victoria closed the volume carefully. "She had good taste. Was she a teacher?" Wade nodded. "Before she married my father, she taught me to read on those same sonnets." "You miss her," Victoria observed. "Every day," Wade admitted, "both of them, even after all these years." Victoria's hand moved almost imperceptibly closer to his on the bench between them. "I understand. The pain changes over time, but it never truly leaves." Wade looked at her, struck by the depth of understanding in her eyes. Without thinking, he reached out and covered her hand with his own. Victoria's breath caught slightly, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers turned, intertwining with his in a gesture that felt both innocent and profoundly intimate. They sat like that, hands joined, watching as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge. No words were necessary. The simple contact said everything that needed to be expressed between them. When the night air grew too cool to ignore, Victoria reluctantly withdrew her hand. "We should go inside," she murmured. Wade stood, offering his hand to help her up. Victoria took it, rising to her feet with fluid grace. For a moment they stood close, their faces just inches apart in the dim light from the window. Wade could feel the warmth of her breath, see the question in her eyes. "Victoria," he began, his voice rough with emotion. Before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the moment. Both of them tensed, turning toward the sound. In the moonlight, they could make out a lone rider approaching the ranch at a gallop. Wade's hand moved instinctively to his gun. "Get inside. Wake your sisters." Victoria hesitated. What if it's them? One rider isn't their style, but be ready just in case. As Victoria hurried inside, Wade stepped off the porch, his hand resting on his holstered revolver. The rider slowed as he approached, and Wade recognized Miguel, his ranch hand, Mr. Valentine. Miguel called, reining in his horse. "Riders in town, 4 men asking about the Blackburn sisters, the Cartwrights, I think." Wade's jaw tightened. "When?" "This afternoon. They're staying at the saloon. Sheriff Dawson sent me to warn you." Wade nodded. "Good. Go back and tell Dawson I appreciate the warning, then stay in town tonight. Could be trouble here by morning." Miguel looked concerned. "I can stay, help you fight if they come." Wade shook his head. "I need eyes in town more than another gun here. Go." As Miguel rode off, Wade turned back to the house. Victoria stood in the doorway, her sisters behind her, all with expressions of fear and determination. "They're in town," Wade confirmed. "We need to prepare. They could ride out here tonight or wait until morning." Victoria straightened her shoulders. "What do we do?" Wade looked at each sister in turn. "We defend what's ours, our home, our family." The word family seemed to strengthen them all. Victoria nodded. "Tell us what to do." Through the night, they prepared the ranch for potential attack. Wade distributed weapons, his rifle to Victoria, who had proven the best shot among the sisters, his shotgun to Alina, and handguns to Catherine and Josephine. They barricaded windows, created defensive positions, and discussed strategies for various scenarios. As dawn approached with no sign of attackers, Wade called for them to get some rest while they could. "I'll keep watch," he assured them. "Sleep in shifts. Alina first, then Catherine, Josephine, and Victoria." The sisters retreated to their rooms while Wade took up position on the porch, rifle across his knees. About an hour after sunrise, Victoria emerged, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, handing him one of the cups. Wade accepted it gratefully. "You should try." "We don't know when they'll come." Victoria sat beside him, her own rifle leaning against the porch railing. "I keep thinking about what you said last night, about defending what's ours." She looked at him. "Do you really consider us your family now?" Wade met her gaze. "Yes. If you'll have me as part of yours." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, a softening around her eyes. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like that very much. Before Wade could respond, the sound of multiple horses approaching drew their attention. In the distance, a cloud of dust signaled riders coming fast down the road toward the ranch. "They're here," Wade said, rising to his feet. "Wake your sisters. Take positions as we planned." Victoria moved quickly, disappearing into the house. Within minutes, all four sisters had taken their assigned positions. Victoria at an upstairs window with the rifle, Eleanor with the shotgun covering the front door, Catherine at the side window, and Josephine at the back of the house. Wade remained on the porch, standing tall and visible, his message clear. To reach the sisters, they would have to go through him first. As the riders approached, Wade counted 6 men, not 4. The Cartwright brothers had brought reinforcements, as he'd suspected they might. They reined in about 50 yards from the house, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Wade recognized the leader immediately, Clay Cartwright, the eldest brother, known for his cunning and cruelty. "Valentine," Clay called, "we've come for our property." Wade's voice carried across the yard, steady and clear. "There's no property of yours here, just family under my protection," Clay laughed, the sound harsh in the morning air. "Those girls cost us good money. We aim to recover our investment one way or another." "You should leave while you still can," Wade warned. "The sisters are staying here." Clay's expression darkened. "I don't think you understand the situation, Valentine. There are 6 of us and only one of you. We're taking those girls either with your cooperation or over your dead body." Wade stood his ground. "You're wrong about the numbers, Cartwright, and you're wrong if you think I'll let you touch any of them." As if to emphasize his point, Victoria appeared at the upstairs window, rifle clearly visible. Eleanor stepped onto the porch beside Wade, shotgun ready. Catherine and Josephine moved to windows on either side of the house, their positions making it clear that the ranch was well defended. Clay's confidence visibly faltered as he took in the armed women. Well, he drawled, attempting to mask his surprise. "Seems you've been busy, Valentine." "Last chance," Wade said. "Ride away and don't come back." Clay exchanged glances with his brothers and the hired guns beside them. For a moment it seemed they might reconsider. Then Clay's hand moved toward his gun. "Now," Wade shouted, diving for cover as gunfire erupted from all sides. The battle was brief but intense. The Cartwrights, expecting an easy target, found themselves caught in a crossfire. Victoria's rifle took down one of the hired guns immediately, her aim true despite the chaos. Eleanor's shotgun blast caught another attacker as he tried to rush the porch. Catherine and Josephine provided covering fire from their positions, preventing the attackers from flanking the house. Wade engaged Clay directly, their bullets exchanging in a deadly dialogue. One of Clay's brothers fell, clutching his shoulder where Wade's bullet had found him. Another retreated behind their horses, firing wildly and ineffectively. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the attackers lay dead, including one of the Cartwright brothers. Another was seriously wounded. Clay himself was untouched but clearly shaken by the unexpected resistance. "It's over, Cartwright." Wade called from behind the cover of a water trough. "Take your wounded and go. Next time I won't be so merciful." Clay's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over, Valentine, not by a long shot." "Yes," came Victoria's voice, strong and clear from the upstairs window. "It is." The rifle in her hands was aimed directly at Clay's heart, her aim unwavering. From their positions around the house, her sisters maintained their defensive stance, presenting a united front that even Clay Cartwright could not dismiss. For a tense moment, it seemed Clay might choose to continue the fight. Then, with a curse, he signaled to his remaining men, "Get the wounded, we're pulling back." As the Cartwrights retreated, helping their injured onto horses, Wade maintained his vigilance. Only when they were well down the road did he lower his weapon. "Is everyone all right?" he called, one by one. The sisters confirmed they were unharmed. They gathered on the porch, the adrenaline of battle still coursing through them, but giving way to relief. "They'll be back," Catherine said, her practical nature asserting itself even now. Wade shook his head. "I don't think so, not after this. Men like Cartwright prey on the weak. You just showed them you're anything but weak." Victoria's gaze met his, a current of understanding passing between them. "We had a good teacher." And a good reason to fight, Alina added. Josephine, her young face serious beyond her years, looked at the retreating dust cloud. We protected our home. Wade felt a swell of pride at their courage, their resilience. Yes, we did. As they stood together on the porch, the morning sun rising higher in the sky, Wade realized that something fundamental had changed. The Valentine ranch was no longer just his property, it had become their home, their sanctuary. And the Blackburn sisters were no longer just women under his protection, they were his family in all the ways that mattered. Victoria moved to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, for his ears alone. Wade looked down at her, seeing the question in her eyes that went beyond the immediate aftermath of the battle. "Now," he said, his voice gentle, "we live together, if that's what you want." Victoria's eyes softened, a smile beginning at the corners of her mouth. "I think," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that's exactly what I want." In that moment, with the morning sun warming their faces and the knowledge that they had faced danger together and prevailed, Wade Valentine and Victoria Blackburn recognized the bond that had been forming between them since that first day in Westcliffe. A bond of respect, understanding, and something deeper that neither had expected to find but both welcomed with open hearts. Their story was just beginning, but already it had the makings of a tale that would be told for generations of four sisters chained together at market, the cowboy who freed them all and called them family, and the love that had blossomed in the aftermath of courage and sacrifice. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the perfect Colorado summer day. The Valentine ranch was quiet, the events of the previous day's battle seeming almost like a distant dream in the peaceful morning light. Wade stood before the small mirror in his room, adjusting his tie with unaccustomed fingers. It had been years since he'd worn his Sunday best, but today was important, their first appearance in town as a family. A soft knock at his door drew his attention. "Come in," he called. Victoria entered, and Wade's breath caught at the sight of her. She wore a new dress of deep blue that complemented her dark hair and eyes, styled simply but elegantly. A small silver locket hung at her throat, a purchase from their trip to town that she had particularly treasured. "You look." Wade searched for the right word, presentable. Victoria suggested with a small smile. "Beautiful," Wade corrected honestly. A flush of color touched Victoria's cheeks. "Thank you, you clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Valentine." She stepped closer, reaching up to straighten his tie, though this could use some attention. Wade stood still, acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle scent of lavender that surrounded her, the careful movements of her fingers at his collar. When she finished, her hands lingered for just a moment longer than necessary. "There," she said softly, looking up at him. "Much better." Their gazes held, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Wade found himself leaning slightly closer, drawn by something he couldn't name but recognized deep in his soul. The moment was broken by Alina's voice calling from downstairs. "Victoria, are you ready? We should leave soon if we're to make it to church on time." Victoria stepped back, though reluctance was clear in her movements. "We should go," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Wade nodded, offering his arm. "Shall we?" The ride to Westcliffe was filled with a nervous anticipation. This would be their first public appearance since the sisters' arrival, and their first since the confrontation with the Cartwrights. News of the gunfight had undoubtedly spread through town already, coloring perceptions before they even arrived. The small church on the edge of town was already filling with parishioners when the Valentine wagon pulled up. Conversations quieted as they approached, curious eyes following their progress up the church steps. Wade felt Victoria's hand tighten on his arm but was proud to see her head held high, her sisters following with similar dignity. Sheriff Dawson met them at the door, his expression surprisingly warm. "Valentine," he greeted, tipping his hat to the sisters. "Ladies, good to see you all in one piece." "Sheriff," Wade acknowledged. "Any sign of the Cartwrights?" Dawson shook his head. "Rode out yesterday afternoon. Word is they're heading back to Kansas. Seems they found the reception here in Colorado less than hospitable." His eyes twinkled with suppressed amusement. Relief washed over the group. Victoria's shoulders relaxed slightly, and Wade saw similar reactions from her sisters. "That's good news," Wade said. "Thank you for sending Miguel with the warning." Dawson nodded. "Just doing my job," he glanced at the sisters. "Though I hear you ladies did most of the work when it came to defending your home. Impressive shooting from what I'm told." Victoria exchanged glances with her sisters. "We had an excellent teacher," she said, her gaze returning to Wade with warmth. Inside the church, they were the subject of undisguised curiosity. Whispers followed them as they made their way to a pew, but the atmosphere wasn't entirely unwelcoming. Several women nodded politely, and Mrs. Mercer from the dry goods store actually smiled and patted the space beside her, inviting Josephine to sit. As they settled in for the service, Wade was conscious of Victoria beside him, her presence both comforting and exhilarating. The minister began his sermon, a message about community, acceptance, and the many forms that family could take. Wade wondered if the topic had been chosen specifically with them in mind. After the service, they were surrounded by townspeople, some openly curious, others extending genuine welcomes. Mrs. Davidson, the preacher's wife, approached with a basket of freshly baked bread. "For your table," she said, handing it to Alina. "Every home needs good bread." Alina accepted it with a gracious smile. "Thank you, that's very kind. Will you be staying in Westcliffe?" asked Mrs. Mercer directly, the question that was clearly on everyone's mind. Before Wade could answer, Victoria spoke. "Yes, we will. This is our home now." The simple declaration, made with quiet conviction, seemed to satisfy the townsfolk. Conversations shifted to more everyday matters: Catherine's questions about where to find certain seeds for her garden, Alina's interest in medicinal herbs that grew in the area, Josephine's enthusiastic description of the barn that she had befriended. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Dawson pulled Wade aside for a moment. "That's a fine family you've found yourself, Valentine." Wade looked across to where Victoria stood with her sisters, her face animated as she spoke with the schoolteacher. "Yes," he agreed, "they are." Dawson clapped him on the shoulder. "About time you had something in your life besides cattle and memories. Those women bring light into a room." Wade couldn't disagree. In the short time since the sisters had arrived, his world had transformed from a solitary existence focused on survival to something rich with possibility and purpose. On the ride home, the mood was lighter than it had been in weeks. The threat of the Cartwrights had lifted, and their reception in town, while not without its awkward moments, had been generally positive. "I think Mrs. Davidson will be visiting soon," Catherine observed. "She seemed very interested in my plans for the garden." Alina laughed. "She's interested in Wade, more likely. Did you see how she kept looking at him during the sermon?" "She's married to the preacher," Josephine protested. "That doesn't stop her looking," Alina replied with a smirk. Victoria remained quiet during this banter, but Wade noticed a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When their eyes met, the smile deepened, becoming something private and warm between them. Back at the ranch, they changed out of their Sunday clothes and settled into their now familiar routines. Alina began preparing dinner with Catherine's help. Josephine went to check on Sergeant the barn cat, who had indeed become a fixture around the property. Wade found Victoria on the porch, gazing out at the mountains that framed their valley. He joined her, leaning against the railing beside her. "Penny for your thoughts," he offered. Victoria's smile was contemplative. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time. A month ago we were prisoners being sold at market. Now," she gestured to the ranch spread before them, "now we have a home, a place in the community, a future." Wade turned to face her fully. "Do you have any regrets about staying here, I mean?" Victoria shook her head. "No, none." Her eyes met his, unwavering. "Do you, about taking us in?" "Never," Wade said softly. "It's the best decision I've ever made." Victoria's expression softened. "Even with the gunfights and the town gossip," Wade laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Even with that, especially with that." He sobered, his gaze intent on her face. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." She turned to him, her dark eyes serious. Yes, Wade struggled to find the right words, unaccustomed to expressing his deeper feelings. These past weeks, having you and your sisters here, it's changed everything. The ranch feels like a home again, and he paused, gathering his courage. I find myself looking forward to each day in a way I haven't since before the war. Victoria's breath caught slightly. Wade, let me finish, he said gently. I know it's soon, too soon, maybe. But I care for you, Victoria, more than I expected to, more than I thought I could care for anyone again. Victoria's eyes shimmered with emotion. It's not too soon, she whispered. Not when you know something is right. Wade took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. I want you to stay, not out of necessity or gratitude, but because this is where you belong, where we belong together. Victoria's free hand reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with wonder. I want that too, Wade drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. Victoria came willingly, her hands resting against his chest, her face tilted up to his. When their lips finally met, it was with the gentle certainty of two people who had found in each other something they hadn't known they were seeking. The kiss deepened, becoming a promise of all that could be between them: passion and tenderness, strength and vulnerability, a partnership built on mutual respect and growing love. When they finally drew apart, Victoria's eyes were bright with emotion. I never expected this, she admitted. When you freed us that day, I thought only of survival. I never imagined I might find love, Wade suggested, the word coming easier than he had anticipated. Victoria nodded. Yes, love. Wade brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. I love you, Victoria Blackburn. And I want to build a life with you if you'll have me. I love you too, Wade Valentine, Victoria replied, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened. And yes, I want nothing more than to build a life with you. Their second kiss was a seal on that promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they finally parted, it was to find Victoria's sisters watching from the doorway, their expressions ranging from Josephine's delighted grin to Eleanor's knowing smile to Catherine's quiet approval. Well, Eleanor said, breaking the slightly awkward silence, it's about time, Wade laughed, keeping one arm around Victoria's waist. Is dinner ready, or did you come out here just to spy on us? Both, Catherine admitted with a rare grin. But mainly dinner, it's getting cold. As they moved toward the house, Josephine skipped ahead, announcing loudly that she had known it all along. Eleanor and Catherine followed, already discussing what this development might mean for their future arrangements. Victoria hung back slightly, tugging on Wade's hand to pause him at the threshold of their home. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. About us, it won't be easy, especially at first. There will be talk in town, questions about propriety. Wade silenced her concerns with a gentle touch to her cheek. I've never been more certain of anything, he assured her. Let them talk. We know the truth of what we've found together. Victoria's smile was radiant. Yes, we do. Hand in hand, they entered the house, joining the sisters around the table that had become the heart of their shared home. As Wade took his place at the head, Victoria beside him and her sisters completing their circle, he was struck by how completely his life had transformed in just a few short weeks. What had begun as an act of decency, freeing 4 sisters chained together at market, had blossomed into something he had never expected to find again. A family bound not by blood but by choice, by mutual respect, by love in its many forms. And at the center of it all, Victoria, whose courage and grace had awakened his heart from its long slumber. As they shared their meal, filled with conversation and laughter, Wade looked around at these women who had claimed his home and his heart, and knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along: not just a family to protect, but a love to cherish for all the days to come. Autumn painted the Colorado mountains in vibrant golds and reds, the aspen trees shimmering in the clear air. 3 months had passed since the confrontation with the Cartwrights, and life at the Valentine ranch had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and miraculous to Wade. Catherine's garden had flourished beyond anyone's expectations, providing fresh vegetables well into the fall. Eleanor had established herself as something of a local healer, with townspeople occasionally making the journey to the ranch for her remedies. Josephine, now 19, had discovered a talent for working with horses and spent most days helping Miguel train the new colts and Victoria. Wade's heart still quickened whenever he thought of her, which was nearly every moment of every day. Their courtship had progressed with the steady certainty of two people who knew exactly what they wanted. They had made no formal announcement, but the entire town of Westcliffe knew they were courting. Most approved, seeing the positive changes in the formerly solitary rancher, though a few still whispered about the unconventional circumstances of the sisters' arrival. Wade paid little attention to the gossips. His focus was on building a future with Victoria and her sisters, expanding the ranch operations, creating a legacy that would sustain them all for years to come. Today was special. He had ridden into Denver the previous week and returned with something precious hidden in his pocket. Tonight, after dinner, he planned to ask Victoria to marry him, to make official what they already knew in their hearts. The ring was simple but elegant, a gold band set with a small diamond that had once belonged to his grandmother. Wade had carried it with him throughout the war, a talisman of the home and family he hoped to return to. Now, finally, it would serve its intended purpose. As Wade rode in from checking fence lines on the north pasture, he saw Victoria waiting on the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the October chill. The sight of her still made his breath catch her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes lighting up when she spotted him approaching. "You're back early," she called as he dismounted. Wade secured his horse to the hitching post. "Finished faster than I expected." He climbed the porch steps, drawing her into his arms for a lingering kiss. "Missed you." Victoria laughed softly against his lips. "You were only gone a few hours." "Too long," he murmured, kissing her again. When they parted, Victoria studied his face, her expression thoughtful. "You seem different today. Is everything all right?" Wade smiled, amused by her perceptiveness. "Everything is perfect. Where are your sisters?" Eleanor and Catherine went into town for supplies. "Josephine is with Miguel working with that new mare. So we're alone." Wade confirmed, his heart rate increasing slightly. Victoria nodded, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "For at least an hour." "Why? Did you have something in mind, Mr. Valentine?" Wade took her hand, leading her to the bench where they often sat together in the evenings. "I did, as a matter of fact," he swallowed, suddenly nervous despite his certainty. "Victoria, there's something I want to ask you." Victoria's expression grew serious as she recognized his tone. "Yes," Wade took both her hands in his, gathering his courage. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you and your sisters here has made this place a home again. But more than that, you've made me whole again. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever: hope for the future." Victoria's eyes shimmered with emotion. "Wade." He pressed on, determined to say everything he had rehearsed. "I know our beginning was unusual. Not many couples can say they met during a slave market confrontation." This drew a small laugh from Victoria. "But from that first moment when you looked at me with such defiance and dignity, I knew there was something special about you." Wade reached into his pocket, withdrawing the small velvet box he had carried from Denver. Victoria's breath caught as he opened it, revealing the ring nestled inside. "Victoria Blackburn," Wade said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart, "I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled onto Victoria's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then, finding her voice, she whispered, "Yes, Wade Valentine. Yes, I will marry you." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, where it settled as if it had always belonged there. Then he drew her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. When they finally parted, Victoria rested her forehead against his, a smile illuminating her face. "I never expected this," she admitted. "When you freed us that day, I was just grateful for our lives. I never imagined I would find the love of my life." Wade brushed away a tear from her cheek. "Neither did I, but that's the thing about fate, it finds you when you least expect it." Victoria examined the ring on her finger, her expression wondering. "It's beautiful." "It was my grandmother's," Wade explained. "My father gave it to me before I left for the war, said I should save it for when I found a woman worthy of it." Victoria's eyes met his. "And am I worthy?" Wade cupped her face in his hands. "Victoria, you are more than worthy. You are everything I never knew I needed and everything I will ever want." The sound of hoofbeats in the distance signaled the return of Alina and Catherine from town. Victoria glanced toward the road, then back at Wade. "Should we tell them right away?" she asked. Wade smiled. "They're your sisters. What do you think?" Victoria's eyes sparkled. "I think they've been expecting this announcement for weeks. Alina has already hinted about wedding preparations at least twice." Wade laughed. "Then by all means, let's not keep them waiting any longer." When Alina and Catherine arrived, followed shortly by Josephine returning from the pasture, Victoria gathered them in the sitting room. Wade stood beside her, his arm around her waist, as she held out her hand to display the ring. "Wade has asked me to marry him," she announced, her voice vibrant with joy. "And I have accepted." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Josephine squealed with delight, throwing her arms around both of them. Alina's eyes filled with tears as she embraced her sister, then Wade. Catherine, always the most reserved, offered a warm smile and a sincere congratulations. "When will the wedding be?" Josephine asked eagerly. Wade and Victoria exchanged glances. "We were thinking before winter sets in," Wade said. "Perhaps late November, so soon." Alina asked, though she didn't seem displeased. Victoria nodded. "We don't want to wait. It will be a simple ceremony here at the ranch with just family and a few friends from town. And Reverend Davidson to officiate, of course," Catherine added practically. As they discussed the wedding plans, Wade watched Victoria's animated face, her happiness radiating from within. He had never imagined, on that fateful day in Westcliffe when he had seen 4 sisters chained in a wagon, that he would find not only a family but the love of his life. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. Word spread quickly through Westcliffe, and soon the entire town seemed invested in the upcoming nuptials. Mrs. Mercer donated fine fabric for Victoria's wedding dress, which Alina and Catherine worked on in secret, refusing to let either Wade or Victoria see it until the day of the ceremony. Mrs. Davidson organized a group of church ladies to prepare food for the celebration. Sheriff Dawson promised to keep an extra eye on the ranch during the wedding, just in case any unwelcome guests decide to make an appearance. Though there had been no sign of the Cartwrights since their defeat months earlier, Wade took no chances. He and Miguel reinforced the ranch's defenses, and Wade made sure all 4 sisters maintained their shooting skills with regular practice. "You really think they might come back?" Victoria asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. Wade considered the question seriously. "No, not likely. They know they'd be walking into a fight they can't win, but being prepared gives us peace of mind." Victoria leaned against his shoulder, her hand finding his. "I never thought I could feel safe again after what happened to us. But here with you I do." Wade pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's all I want for you and your sisters, to feel safe, to have the freedom to build the lives you choose." Victoria tilted her face up to his. "I choose this life with you. I choose our family, our home, our future together." The day of the wedding dawned clear and cold, a perfect late November day with the mountains standing like sentinels in the distance. The ranch had been transformed, the barn cleaned and decorated for the celebration, the house filled with the scent of baking and the sound of excited voices. Wade spent the morning in town with Sheriff Dawson, following the tradition of not seeing his bride until the ceremony. When he returned to the ranch, guests were already arriving, townspeople from Westcliffe, neighboring ranchers, even the station master from the railroad who had taken a special interest in Josephine's vibrant personality during her visits to town. The ceremony was to be held in the front yard of the ranch house, where Catherine had created a simple but elegant archway decorated with late blooming wildflowers and evergreen boughs. Rows of chairs faced the archway, with a central aisle leading from the house. Wade stood beneath the arch with Reverend Davidson, his heart pounding as he waited for his bride. He wore a new suit purchased in Denver, his boots polished to a shine, his usually untamed hair neatly combed. A hush fell over the gathering as the door of the house opened. Eleanor and Catherine emerged first, both wearing dresses of soft green that complemented their coloring. They took their places on what would be Victoria's side of the arch. Josephine followed, carrying a small bouquet of flowers from Catherine's garden, her young face radiant with happiness for her eldest sister. Then Victoria appeared, and Wade forgot to breathe. Her dress was simple but elegant, ivory silk that flowed around her figure like water. Her dark hair was partly up, partly flowing loose over her shoulders, adorned with small white flowers. But it was her face that captivated him, her eyes shining with love, her smile illuminating her entire being as she walked toward him. Victoria reached him, taking his outstretched hands. For a moment they stood there, lost in each other's gaze, the rest of the world fading away. Reverend Davidson cleared his throat gently, bringing them back to the present moment. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying across the yard, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Wade Valentine and Victoria Blackburn in holy matrimony." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Wade and Victoria had written their own vows, promises that spoke of their unique journey together and the future they were building. "Victoria," Wade said, his voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him, "when I first saw you, you were in chains, but your spirit was free. You showed me what true courage looks like, what it means to protect those you love at all costs. I promise to honor that courage every day of our lives together. I promise to stand beside you, to support your dreams, to cherish your strength, and to love you with everything I am until my last breath." Victoria's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded, "Wade, you freed us from physical chains, but more than that, you freed my heart from the prison of fear it had built around itself. You showed me that family can be formed through choice as well as blood, that love can grow in the most unexpected circumstances. I promise to walk beside you through whatever life brings us, to face challenges with the courage you've taught me, to fill our home with love and laughter, and to cherish you all the days of my life." When they exchanged rings, a simple gold band joining the engagement ring on Victoria's finger, a matching band for Wade, the connection between them seemed to vibrate with intensity, a bond visible to everyone watching. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Davidson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Wade, you may kiss your bride." Wade drew Victoria into his arms, his kiss a tender promise of all they had vowed to each other. The assembled guests erupted in applause and cheers, led by Josephine's enthusiastic whooping. The celebration that followed was joyous and relaxed, with music provided by a local fiddler and his son, food spread out on long tables in the barn, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Wade watched with pride as his new wife moved among their guests, her happiness radiating from within. Her sisters, too, seemed to shine with a special light. Eleanor engaged in animated conversation with the town doctor, Catherine dancing somewhat shyly with Miguel, Josephine flitting from group to group like a butterfly, bringing smiles wherever she went. As the evening progressed, Wade found a moment alone with Victoria, drawing her away from the festivities to the quiet of the porch. "Mrs. Valentine," he murmured, savoring the sound of her new name. Victoria's smile was radiant. "I like the sound of that." Wade took her hands, drawing her close. "Are you happy?" "Completely," Victoria assured him. "This day has been perfect." Wade glanced back toward the barn where the celebration continued. "Your sisters seem to be enjoying themselves." Victoria followed his gaze. "They are, I think. I think they've finally found peace here, just as I have." She looked up at Wade. "We all have, thanks to you." Wade shook his head. "We found it together. That day in Westcliffe changed all our lives, but what we've built since then, that's been a shared creation." Victoria reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I love you, Wade Valentine." "And I love you, Victoria Valentine," he replied, still marveling at the sound of her new name, "more than I ever thought possible." Their kiss was both a celebration of the day and a promise of all the days to come, days that would bring joys and challenges, laughter and tears, but always the foundation of love and family that they had built together. When they rejoined the celebration, it was as a united front, husband and wife, the core of a family that had formed in the most unexpected of circumstances, but had grown into something beautiful and enduring. As Wade danced with his bride beneath the stars, surrounded by friends and family, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the horror of seeing four sisters chained together at market to the joy of calling them family, his life had been transformed by a single act of decency that had blossomed into love. And as he held Victoria in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder, Wade knew with absolute certainty that he had found his true purpose not in the solitary existence he had known before, but in the family they had created together. A family bound not by blood but by choice, by love, by the shared experience of finding hope where there had been only despair. It was, he thought as Victoria smiled up at him, the greatest adventure of his life, and it was only just beginning. 5 years later, the Valentine Ranch had transformed into one of the most prosperous properties in the county. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, Wade and Victoria's twin sons, William and James, now 3 years old, and the family members who had joined through marriage. Eleanor had wed Dr. Thomas Bennett 2 years after Victoria and Wade's wedding, bringing the talented physician into their extended family. They lived in town during the week, where Eleanor assisted in his practice, but spent every weekend at the ranch. Catherine had surprised everyone by falling in love with Miguel. Their wedding, held under the same arch where Wade and Victoria had exchanged vows, had united not just two people but two cultures. They had built a small house on the ranch property where they lived with their 1-year-old daughter, Rosa. Josephine, now 24, had recently become engaged to Stephen Baker, the young lawyer who had opened a practice in Westcliffe the previous year. Her vibrant personality and his steady nature complemented each other perfectly. Wade stood on the porch of the main house, watching Victoria in the garden with their sons. The boys were the image of their father, with the same intense blue eyes, but they had inherited their mother's quick intelligence and compassion. Victoria looked up, catching Wade's gaze. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of her still made his heart quicken. She smiled, saying something to the twins before making her way toward him. "Admiring the view?" she asked as she joined him on the porch. Wade drew her into his arms. "Always." "You and the boys make a beautiful picture." Victoria leaned into his embrace. "I was just telling them the story." "Which one?" Wade asked, though he already knew the answer. "Our story. About the day their father saved 4 sisters and called them family." Wade looked out over their property, the expanded barn, the thriving garden, the small houses where their extended family lived, the pastures dotted with cattle and horses. It was more than he had ever dreamed of having, this life rich with love and purpose. "Best decision I ever made," he murmured, pressing a kiss to Victoria's temple. Victoria turned in his arms, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in town that day, if you had looked away like everyone else?" Wade considered her question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I look at all we've built together, at our sons, at the happiness your sisters have found, and I know that some things are meant to be, no matter how they begin." Victoria rested her head against his chest, her arms tightening around his waist. "I believe that too. That day in Westcliffe wasn't the end of something terrible, it was the beginning of something wonderful." As the afternoon sun bathed their home in golden light, Wade Valentine held his wife close, watching their sons play in the garden that Catherine had created, hearing the distant sound of Eleanor's laughter as she and Thomas arrived for their weekend visit. Soon Catherine and Miguel would join them with little Rosa, and Josephine would bring Stephen for dinner, completing their family circle. Wade thought back to the solitary man he had been before, existing rather than living, haunted by the past instead of building a future. That man would never have imagined the rich tapestry his life would become woven with threads of love, family, and the courage to take a stand when it mattered most. "I love you, Victoria Valentine," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Victoria looked up at him, her dark eyes reflecting the same depth of feeling. "And I love you, Wade Valentine, today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." Their kiss was both a celebration of all they had built and a promise of all that was yet to be, a testament to the enduring power of the family they had created together. Beginning with that fateful day when 4 sisters were chained together at market, the cowboy freed them all and called them family.